Welcome back, everybody, to the CD Financial Podcast. CD Financial, where health meets wealth. I'm Marcus C., your host. That man across from me, as always, Chuck D. Chuck, my man, what's up today?
Living large, baby. Living large.
How much larger today are you than yesterday? How much larger are you living? How's that?
So yeah, I don't know. 5'9", a buck
I've-
70, buck 73. I'm hoping it hasn't increased any because that's kind of my ideal weight. I mean, back when I lived in Dallas for a couple years and I was using my body for work.
Power washing.
Thank God I no longer do that. Yeah, and I was eating a bunch. I stacked it up here, but I also stacked it on the belly too. But I reached 187. But I got to tell you, there was some hangage there just as a 23, 24-year old, right? I didn't even
Yeah.
realize that a friend of mine came to town. I transitioned my business to him, and
Uh-huh.
he tapped me on the belly, and I realized at that point he started laughing at me. He goes, "Hey, you put on some weight."
Well,
It's funny because he's in the kind of the shape I'm in now, right? We're about the same age.
yeah.
We keep our weight off, and it's funny. You got to be careful when you're one of those people that keeps their weight off to those that that didn't. So yeah, I did. It was kind of surprising. I moved to
Um,
Brooklyn. I was walking to work from the apartment and back again, and man, I dropped 10 pounds in like 6 weeks, and I wasn't trying to do anything, just going to going to work. Right?
I,
Yeah.
I had that same experience moving to New York. Now, I lived in Chicago before I went to New York. And Chicago, I mean, it's cold. It feels like 12 and a half months out of the year. There's, you get like 2 days in June when you have nice weather. Um, so all you do is sit around and eat things like, deep dish pizza and Chicago dogs and Italian
Yeah,
beef
yeah.
sandwiches. So when I got to New York the first month, I dropped 20 pounds just from the walking. Yeah.
So you how much were you then?
When I got to New York, I was 225 and I
Huh.
dropped down to 205 within a month.
Huh. I
But even
went.
now, I mean, my healthy weight right now it hovers about 210, between 210 and 220 is a good weight for me.
Yeah, really didn't go back to 177 again, but I remember they wanted me to dump some foods because my cholesterol was like 206 or 207. And so
Hmm.
and they gave me a list and I was like, "What? This is no fun." But it was eggs, butter. I remember eggs and butter and maybe it was I don't know if it was bacon or
Yeah.
sausage. I can't remember now. Anyway, I dumped the eggs and the butter and whatever else they asked and when was that? That was back in the 90s. And oddly enough, I lost weight and I wasn't trying to. And people said, "Hey, you lost weight." And I'm like, I didn't even need to lose weight, right? Because I was
Yeah.
lifting twice a week with free weights and running the Brooklyn Bridge twice a week. And I was like, I did lose weight. It was weird. And I've never really gone back to 177. And now I can't seem to put on the muscle mass. When you get older, when you
It gets
exercise,
harder.
your body doesn't really multiply muscle like it did when I look at my 22-year-old now, and it's like somebody put a little like a air hose on his pecs, right? And he's like this, and
Yeah.
I'm like, that's funny. I go up and tap on it, right? Yeah,
Well, I will say that. I mean, I remember in my 20s, when I first started doing powerlifting with a buddy of mine, I packed on muscle really. I've never had an issue packing on muscle. And even to this day, I can still pack it on if I want. I can put on the muscle. I have to kind of walk that fine line between packing on muscle weight and maintaining a healthy weight. Because once I'm up over two and a quarter, it's too much for me. I
yeah,
really need to hover around 210,
yeah,
where
yeah. That's
where
right.
I'm in a
Okay,
good
sounds like we're
spot.
doing a whole episode on health, right? But let's
We will. Well, maybe one of these days we're going to do a health rundown, and we'll work on all these health
we'll
issues
do one at the
that
end.
we
So
face.
we want to talk today. What are we talking about?
So we have that email from the OPM, right? And we're
Right.
talking about the offer for federal employees. Now we've discussed the advantages or why you would want to consider accepting the offer and resigning, but we're going to take it from the other side of that coin today and talk about advantages to going back to the office.
Yeah, so let's talk about in office and
Yeah,
what that looks like, right? Now, we
yeah,
know some of the disadvantages, right? And that's what a lot of people complaining, hey, like I said before, they told me, Charles, I've talked to scores of you, and and you've said if I have to go back to the office and go through rush hour and traffic,
yeah.
I'm out, right? I'm
Yeah, traffic
pow.
seems to be the big
Know what that
deterrent,
word is?
I think.
My friend, my Hawaiian friend says, I'm pow. I'm good. I'm done. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, traffic is a big deterrent. But
Yeah.
why don't we talk about the advantages, right? Why don't you,
Right.
let's spitball, Mark. Why don't you tell me about some of the advantages?
Okay, so we're and again, if we're going to make it worth fighting the traffic on the 5 or the 10 or wherever you're currently located to get it to your office, there's got to be some real advantages, right? So the first one that jumps off the page to me is money. I think there's definitely a monetary consideration when you're looking at this, because we're talking about people who maybe are at the point where they're reaching that point where they can retire, but there might still be, if not a need, a desire to continue with the income for a few more years.
Yeah.
What do
I
you think of
mean,
that?
I think money's an important thing. I think
Yeah.
it allows you to stay in your house and pay your bills. I think, maybe even go
Generally
beyond
speaking, yeah,
that,
we,
save for
we,
save for retirement, go on a
yeah,
vacation, right?
yeah,
Yeah. And it's expensive here, but it just seems like it's expensive everywhere, right? Back in Philly when we lived there, I mean, we talked about the 5 and the 10 because they use the
yeah.
article, but I mean,
The
Interstate 95 and what do you got running through Austin? I've forgotten the name of the highway. Is that
I
75?
35.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
Stemmons in Dallas, they call it Stemmons Freeway. Yeah.
yeah. It's a parking lot most of the day. Yeah,
Oh wow.
it's a
It's those
mess.
Californians moving there. That's so funny. So yeah, so wherever you live, right? Yeah, money's important, right? And if you got a
Yep.
steady job, now, and federal job has always been seen as a steady job, right?
Yeah, safe.
What was that? Yeah, and so there's been talk about if you're a new hire, it'll be a at will status, which means you can be released, let go,
Yeah,
fired for without cause, without giving a
without
reason
cause.
prior
Yeah,
notice. But it's been different. It's been a cause for dismissal. It's always been very difficult to get
yeah.
rid of somebody on a federal job, right?
Yeah,
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 but
and that at will clause is something that's usually agreed upon as you go in. So if you didn't have that going in, you shouldn't have to worry about it. But some people do accept work with that as kind of a stipulation. It's a job, but it's at will, which means you can be terminated. But I don't
yeah,
think most people have to deal with that.
and most Californians, I don't think, most don't realize that California is an at-will state too. So as an
No,
employer, yeah, if things aren't going well, you don't need a whole litany of reasons. It's an at-will state. Yeah, but you don't
yeah,
see that happening too much either. So
yeah,
let's get back to advantages of working in office, right? I
right.
mean, when we were all cooped up during COVID, we were starting to hunger because we were seeing the same people just inside our home, right? And even on
Yeah,
Zoom, it was cool. We were grateful for Zoom, but it didn't
not
quite
the same.
do it all the way, did it?
Yeah, yeah,
No.
and I think there's two sides to that. If we want to call it a social aspect, there's two sides to that coin that I think are very important when you consider whether or not you want to struggle through traffic to go back to a job. And I think the first thing we might want to talk about is the camaraderie of being in an office. Yes, it's not always fun to be under the artificial lights and hang around an office all day, but there is that aspect of camaraderie, going and seeing people that you like, even seeing some of the people you may not like as much, but I mean, just seeing people in person, there's something to that. As far as humans, we desire that. I mean, we crave that, don't you? I mean, you work in an office full of people, right?
Yeah, I do. That's funny because the practice in the firm is mostly virtual, but
Yep.
we are what do they call it? Work in office. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, in office work team. And so I think we get more done, right? I think
Yes.
the level of communication is transmitted much easier in
Yep.
office, and the level of learning, the level of transitioning skill sets to one another.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
it is easier, it is more effective. And not
Yep.
saying that because I do have one completely virtual um, team member, right? But she's very sharp and she picks up things quickly. At the same time, when I'm trying to show one of my team members something, I can actually show them hands on.
Right.
We can communicate, the level of emotion, right, and all
Mhm.
that. You read body language, but even I could show you on my computer. I could explain to you. So there's certainly is a level of communication that's transmitted, and I think even a force of emotion that's pulled together when you're in person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
One thing I love about what you do, I don't know how many people, tuning in know this about your office, but you oftentimes, if not every day, you buy lunch for the office and everybody sits together as a family. And to me, it's very reminiscent of working in a restaurant because most restaurants, the large ones anyway, have family meal, right? And it's pre-shift. You get in there and everybody grabs a plate. And when you have food in your hand and you're sitting around, whether or not you get along, everybody gets along at the dinner table, right? Everybody can look across at each other with food in their hand and enjoy some good conversation and just that time together. I know you do that, and it seems to have built a certain unity in your office that you don't get everywhere. And I'm not saying every federal employee has that going back to the office, but there is something about sitting there with people in the room, chit chatting. Sometimes important topics, like you're saying, sometimes it's learning, sometimes it's teaching, and you absorb so much better when you're in person. But sometimes it's meaningless chatter. We need it, right? I mean,
yeah,
we
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
always start out these episodes just kind of chit chatting, and it feels good.
Yeah, I think it's funny. The meaningless chatter is not really meaningless at all, is it?
Yeah,
It brings you together and makes you feel like family. You're building relationships.
yeah,
You're getting closer, right? You get and there's that other point. Going back in office, there's a sense of camaraderie, isn't there?
yeah, yeah.
Right? You're going to want
Absolutely.
to look after your team member a little bit more, right? You
Yeah.
may want to pick up the slack. I think it feeds that the social nature and the generous
Right.
spirit of a team. Even, yeah, I would say that. I would say those are a lot of advantages to going back in office.
Yeah, and if I could maybe build on that with one other point, because we're talking about a camaraderie, a social aspect, but being around other humans, you mentioned getting in the pandemic or during the pandemic. Um, a lot of people went through some depression and went through some dark times because they were isolated from other human beings. So even if you're not necessarily a real social person by nature, oftentimes just being around other humans is good for your head. It's good for your mind just to be in the presence of other human beings. And we're made that way. I mean, we need each other.
Yeah,
We need to feel the other person in the room sometimes
yeah, I would
for our
even.
mental health.
Yeah, we do. Yeah,
Yeah,
we need
and
a contact. I would say even the amount of knowledge and wisdom sometimes when you're
mhm,
together, ideas will come out of you because of being present with a team, with a workforce. Those
right.
oftentimes those ideas will be shared, and you can exchange them when you have the thought. Maybe I don't
Yeah.
know. Yeah, I don't know if I'm making sense, but sometimes it's more likely to come out. You're more likely to exude that wisdom when you're together collectively.
Yeah, there's that the old scripture about the multitude of counselors, right? When you
There,
bring people together.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There's wisdom in
There,
a multitude of counselors, right? Yeah,
that's it. So there is a
yeah,
collective wisdom, and some a lot of those times, it's funny because it's not necessarily something scripted or laid out that, hey, today we're talking about this, but a lot of times just you're in an office and you start chit chatting about something, and one thing leads to another, and suddenly we hit a topic that's important, and now everybody's in the same room. Now we're on this topic together, and now we're getting those ideas from different people bouncing around.
yeah,
Uh, as opposed to if you're at home and something occurs to you, now you got to set up a meeting on Zoom. Now you got to, find a time that works for everybody, and then send out an invitation, wait for everybody to accept, and so forth. And by that time, maybe all that good, energy you had behind that idea is gone. By the time you get to
right.
the Zoom meeting, we're sitting around looking at each other, wondering why the heck did we come to this meeting and they didn't just email me something that I could have
Right.
responded to, right?
Yeah. So I don't know. Instead of seeing it as, I think I think the administration maybe saw it as they were going to turn the screws up on federal
Yeah,
employees. And I think, instead of seeing it like that, flip the script. See it as a opportunity, right?
yeah,
To increase your productivity and hey, how about even your career? To see it as
yeah,
something that'll, you know, improve your career. There was talk in those, I read those four pillars over, and there was talk about in that original email to offer a resignation. And it mentioned, you're going to be those who perform will get rewarded,
Yeah.
incommensurate with their performance. And I thought, you know what? You, y'all are listening. They're your GS employees or your wage grade employees, right? When it's typically a blue collar job, or I mean, I see all these pay scales. ND for naval civilian employees, right? What did that stand for, Marcus? The ND?
Naval. Oh.
Naval demo? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
boy,
Naval,
I looked that
huh?
up too because it's the naval demonstration. I think is what it
Yeah,
was.
yeah. And then you see ACT demo at the Air Force, right? I think Army has a pay scale that some are
Yeah,
GS, some are another, acronym. Well,
yeah.
anyway, the ACT demo and the ND, those weren't set like GS. GS grade and step was the first step in your grade. One, two,
Hmm.
and three happens every year. And then after that, from step 3 to 6, it happens every 2 years. From step three, four, five, and six. I'm sorry, from step four, five, and six.
4, 5, and 6. Yeah,
Yeah. And then after step 6, it's every 3 years to 7, 8, 9, and 10. Finally, you cap it at your 10th step. It takes 20 years to get through that if you do the math, two
yeah,
decades. But guess what? Some of you staff members that are listening, you aren't even on the GS, and you get rewarded for your contribution to the mission, to the organization's mission. And I see you going up a lot faster than on the step scale. So it might work to your benefit, right? That
yeah,
and or you're a GS employee and you get QSIs. Seems like I'm never surprised when I can even guess with those that I'm visiting with. I'll say, you've gotten some QSIs, haven't you? Because you're connected, you
yeah,
care, and you're wanting to you want to get after it. And so when I'm helping you with your plan for retirement or giving you advice to get you in a better position, you're right on it. I'll meet with you a year or two later and you've done the things that I've recommended. It's just, not only is it a compliment to me, it empowers you.
yeah,
Sometimes it multiplies your TSP, and more importantly, it's a reflection of who you are. So I
yeah,
see these QSIs all the time already. So it's not as if, I don't know, the folks that I work with federally, they're pretty proactive. I mean, they really are, right? And no matter
yeah,
what your pay scale is, I see a lot of fine examples of people that are plugged in to their work. Yeah.
yeah. And I would say this too. There's another upside that we hadn't thought about. When something like this happens, it does oftentimes force you to take stock of your current situation. Sometimes you just kind of get in a groove and you're just riding along and you're not really thinking too much about what's happening. Something like this comes up, it makes you stop and think about, well, do I really want to go back to the office? If I do, what are the advantages? What should I think about? How is this going to affect my retirement? Will I retire quicker? Will I need more time to retire? And so forth. So maybe if nothing else comes out of this, maybe it helps everybody to just stop and think for a moment about their current situation and ways to better it.
Yes, yeah, that's right. And ways to better it. I couldn't agree anymore. Um, you know, yes, the we talked about the mental health aspect of it, right?
Uh huh.
And if you
Yeah.
about being together, it actually improves your mental health, and we compared it to COVID. Um, the worry of what's going to be in store and what's going to happen, that's not going to improve your life one bit. It's not going to
No.
help your performance at your job. I would not worry. You mentioned something from scriptures already, and there's something that Christ said. He said, when you worry, you don't add 1 cubit to your
Yeah.
lifespan. I guess that was a, a table measurement, right? So
Right.
you don't add 1 day to your lifespan by worrying. In fact, you probably detract from your
Take a couple days
lifespan.
off.
You
Yeah.
a couple days less by worrying, right? Worry doesn't help you at all. So you
Yeah.
deal with today, do the best you can today, right? And you will be looked after tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
just go after whatever you're doing with a zeal and a gusto, because what does my wife always say? Where focus goes, energy flows. If you
Yeah.
focus on something negatively, then it's gonna produce negative results. It really does. Focus on positively what you're up to, and it's going to produce things that are positive. Sometimes, and if this produces a change, and you have to change your employment or your employer, you might find out in the end that it was to your benefit. And you'll say, boy, oh
Possibly.
boy, how many times have I heard that, right? Where folks will say, man, I didn't see it as a benefit, but man, I'm glad for that, right? I remember,
Yeah.
I remember, Mark, that we transitioned from Pittsburgh to Philly, and I
Hmm.
had to reinvent my company, and I was I was not looking forward to it. And in the end, a year later, I started realizing, oh my goodness, I'm
Much
in
better.
a much, much bigger market. And
Yeah.
there is so much more opportunity here. And by the end of that stint, let me see, Isaac, and then Isaac was, I think, 16, he was 8. So
Yeah.
in about 8.5, 9 years of being in that region. It was 10 years, actually about 10 years, about 10 years of being in the Philly Metroplex. Wow, boy, oh boy, did things work out well because we were there. Yeah, and I love Pittsburgh. There's lots of opportunity there. But in my specific line of work back then, it was much more advantageous where I was. That's
Yeah.
what I want to say. And the competition was nowhere near what it was back in Pittsburgh. It was very unusual and very, very positive. And I look back and think, because we relocated to do volunteer work. And so because we chose that path that was not connected at all to materialism, it came back in spades. Don't
Yeah.
This is my advice. I would say, as a health tip, Marcus, as a health tip, I would say,
Yeah.
don't, this is our health tip for today. Don't worry, because worry does not help you. Do your research, do the best that you can, and your best is good enough.
Yeah.
Stay open, stay modest, try to stay humble, but a modest person will accept information from other sources. And my mom used to say, if I heard it from one source, I'll be okay with it. But if I heard it from the
Yeah.
mouth of two witnesses, she would say,
Yeah.
then I'm going to listen. I'm going to perk up.
Yeah.
If you've asked for help, if you prayed for help, and then you get it from two sources, guess what? That might be your answer. And you want to be open and listen. That's the other thing I would say, Mark. In the business world, in
Yeah.
my entire life, um, I was always open to suggestions, and I had different clients would just drop things on my lap and say, "Why don't you do this?" And I would come back. I remember I said to the one gentleman, I said, Dave was his name. I go, Dave, how am I going to how am I going to do that? He goes, I don't know, Charles. I'm just telling you where your strengths are, right? The
Yeah.
rest you figure out on your own. I'm just telling
Yeah.
you, you shouldn't be doing the work. You should be doing this. He said,
Yeah.
because that's where your gifts are in communicating. He said, that's where you're at. So I had to go back, talk with my team, which was my wife, right? Who's very intelligent. And we
Yeah.
together collectively, she said, I think he's right. Right. And there was a number of times where it was the clients telling me what works, and they had that wisdom. So with your going back to work with your team members, a lot of times your team members can feed you. Sometimes you might want to solicit it. Say, hi, a lot of times,
Yeah.
hey, how do you think I can work through this problem easier? That's why we do workday huddles, right? Where we say, hey, are
Yep.
there any points of what do they call that, constraint, where we can, release it, right? And in a huddle, we can talk about, hey, this is what I'm dealing with, this is what I'm dealing with, right? And be open. It encourages more of an
Yes.
openness where you say, hey, I'm struggling with this here. You guys got anything to help? And you can share those ideas or what has worked for you, right? There's a
Yep.
lot of benefits to being
Ab-
in person. So I wouldn't,
Absolutely.
yeah, I don't see it as a disadvantage. See it as an
I,
opportunity, baby. It's knocking right now. Yeah.
you never know where it leads. I just maybe build on the health tip that you mentioned a second ago about not worrying about tomorrow. You made me think of a Tony Robbins tells this story of when he learned to be a car driver and race car driver. That was one of the things he wanted to learn. And they told him, they said, when you spin out, and this is how they teach the drivers, they say, don't look, don't look at what's around you, look at where you want to go. So in other words,
Interesting.
get your eyes back on the road, and you will automatically, correct. And he says, if you start looking at the walls or the grass or other cars, you lose control. And
Interesting.
that's really what worrying is. It's looking at all the wrong stuff, right? We're paying attention to all these things that could distract us or wreck us, if you will, right? Whereas if we just get our focus back on the road, looking ahead, it eases that tension, and then we're working back towards our goals. So yeah, that's a great health tip to just focus on where you want to go,
Super
look
good
ahead,
advice.
and don't worry about things you can't control.
That is outstanding advice. Thank you
Yeah,
for that
yeah.
for that illustration. That's great. And thank you, Tony. TR.
Well, thank Tony for that. Yes. So very nice. Well, was there anything else that you wanted to mention as far as like
No,
in
we're
person
tight,
getting
Marcus.
back in?
We're tight. We're tight. I like it. I like it a lot.
Perfect. So
Right.
if you are headed back to the office, just know there's definitely advantages to doing so, and you're not alone. And I think you're going to find out in the end that it might be a really, really good idea for you because you get to enjoy the other people in the office, right? I
Yeah,
mean, we
keep
love this.
yeah,
I wish we were
absolutely.
in an office every day.
Yeah, keep
Truly.
contributing to your
Yeah.
organization's mission, right?
Yeah.
And you might in fact improve the mission one piece at a time, one player at a time.
Perfect. And as always, get someone on your side. No matter what you're thinking about for the future, get someone on your side to help you out. Someone that like CD Financial that's going to help you plan those things. So again, like our health tip, right? We don't want to worry too much about the future. Get people on your side, and it'll help alleviate that worry. As always, click on the links below. You can contact us directly. Make sure you subscribe so you get these videos direct to you as soon as they come out. And we appreciate very much everybody tuning in. We love you all. Thank you for your time. Chuck, thank you as always, my brother. Always a pleasure to be here with you.
Yeah, you too, Marcus.
All
I
right.
love this
Take
time.
care, everybody. Until next time.
All right, we'll talk to you really soon. CD Financial, where health meets wealth.